November 3rd, 1944. Dawn over Metz revealed a scene of ruin. A bakery reduced to rubble, its ovens and counters smashed. Private First Class Michael Donovan, just 22 and half a year into frontline service, rested his eye against the 8x sight of his M1903 Springfield and peered into a grey morning that seemed to be swallowing shapes whole. Through the mist, German positions slowly resolved themselves until they were no longer suggestions but definite forms. He had already been credited with 14 enemy kills, and he felt, with the cold certainty soldiers learn too quickly, that he was about to add his name to a rapidly growing list of Americans who had not survived the last 3 brutal weeks in the city. Metz had been transformed by the defenders into a carefully laid trap. The Germans weren't merely holding ground. They had engineered the urban terrain so that it worked like a mechanism specifically intended to hunt and eliminate Allied snipers. Donovan's rifle could deliver accurate fire to 800 yards, and he'd been trained at Fort Benning under demanding standards. He'd even finished top of his class, but none of that training insulated him from the reality waiting outside the ruined bakery's shattered windows. Every American who raised a scoped rifle toward a German strongpoint soon learned an ugly truth. The moment you lift your sight to look for an enemy was already looking back. The Wehrmacht had perfected a counter-sniper system known as the double position. 2 marksmen would operate in close tandem, separated by a few dozen yards, and take turns shooting in such a way that it became extremely difficult, often impossible, to determine the origin of the firing. If you detected one shooter, his partner would already be lining up on your location. It was a tactic that traded on geometry and timing rather than brute force. The math of the exchange favored the Germans. Donovan, like most snipers, needed around a dozen seconds or more to bring a target into focus and squeeze the trigger. The German teams were operating on the same rhythm, except they managed to shoot first every time. The 5th Infantry Division's sniper squad had paid a terrible price trying to counter this method. 23 snipers from the division had been killed attempting to pierce the German system. Corporal James Bradley, who had recorded 9 confirmed kills, died on October 18th when a Mauser round came through a factory window at 400 yards. Private First Class Robert Chen was mortally wounded on October 29th. He spent his last 40 minutes conscious and dying in a friend's arms while his spotter tried in vain to staunch the flow of blood. Patterns like these do not belong to mere chance. Officers noticed quickly that American shooters were being identified and struck before they could complete their own target acquisition. The standard orders came down in response. Keep moving. Change firing positions constantly. Don't stay in one place long enough to be pinned down. But movement alone was not an answer. The German advantage was not simply the ability to spot a man in one place. It was a deeper command of the battlefield's spatial picture. They understood sight lines, concealed approaches, elevation differences, and the precise angles from which a man could be exposed when he assumed a firing posture. They watched, often for minutes, observing and calculating before a shot was made. Donovan could see where the American system failed with painful clarity. His scope, for all its magnification, narrowed his world down to a tiny cone, roughly 8 degrees of vision, so that, when he looked through it, the rest of the surrounding environment became effectively invisible. It was like peering through a short cardboard tube. What the tube framed was sharp and immediate. Everything outside was a shadowed unknown. At typical combat ranges, that narrow view covered only a matter of yards. Flanks, raised positions in the ruined factory stacks, debris heaps where a second shooter could wait. All of these lay in blind sectors his peripheral awareness could not penetrate, while he fixed his eye to the scope. The Germans had designed their counter-sniping doctrine around precisely that limitation. While American marksmen concentrated on the distant targets ahead, German teams slipped into positions to fire into those blind arcs. The result was cruel and efficient. American snipers were being felled at roughly 2-1. Faced with those odds, Donovan chose to do what training manuals and official directives had not suggested. He improvised. The night before the action, inside the skeleton of a hotel torn apart by shelling, he fashioned a field modification that his battalion commander would later describe as the dumbest authorized piece of kit he'd ever seen. A description that, in the commander's mind, was also grudgingly admiring. Donovan took a small, standard-issue shaving mirror, the thin 4x6 metal kind almost every soldier had tucked away for ritual of morning grooming, and fastened it to the left side of his scope. The placement was deliberate. He set the mirror at a 45-degree angle, about 8 inches in front of his eye, so that while he continued to look through the magnified sight at his target, the mirror sat in his peripheral vision and reflected activity occurring behind and to the side. He used electrical tape gleaned from signal wiring to affix the mirror, a makeshift mount that contravened several regulations concerning the alteration of issued weapons. It took him a long time to balance the arrangement so that the added weight wouldn't throw off the rifle's point of impact. It took patient adjustments to make sure the mirror didn't shake or flinch when he breathed. In the end, he spent 40 minutes testing and tuning until he could scan behind and to either side without breaking his sight picture or moving his head. Donovan didn't care about the paperwork. The official channels had delivered no fix. The only people getting killed were his comrades. Bradley and Chen were gone. 21 other American snipers were dead. His choice boiled down to an ugly calculus of survival. Obey the rules and die, or break them and hope a clever hack kept you alive long enough to make it through the next firefight. On the morning that followed, Donovan and a new partner, Private Sam Martinez, a nervous 19-year-old who had been a sniper for barely 3 weeks and had not yet scored a single confirmed hit, set themselves up in the ruined bakery. From their position they could see the factory across the ruined street, roughly 400 yards out, the place everyone knew the Germans favored for their counter-sniping work. The factory's windows and roofline had been turned into observation points by the defenders. It was a place where a man could sit and wait, while the mist and rubble hid his movements. Donovan felt the weight of what he'd done. The mirror, the break from doctrine, the quiet gamble. And yet he also felt the clarity of purpose that comes when improvisation substitutes where strategy has failed. He trained both eyes, one fixed through the magnified tube, the other catching the reflected scenes in the shaving mirror. It was an awkward arrangement, alien and delicate, a small civilian object turned into a soldier's lifeline. If the modification worked, it would give them just enough situational awareness to spot the traps that had been killing their men. If it failed, it would be yet another attempt to outwit a lethal, patient enemy in a city designed around death. The real question for Donovan and Martinez that morning was not whether German snipers were out there, that was a given, but where exactly they had positioned themselves and when they would decide to fire. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the faint noises of shifting debris and distant artillery. At 7:23 a.m., Donovan finally caught sight of movement through his scope. A German marksman on the 3rd floor of the shattered factory opposite, visible only for a flickering instant as he adjusted his perch near a blown-out window. Donovan's pulse steadied, his finger finding the trigger. Training took over. Acquire the target, control your breathing, squeeze. But before he could fire, something in the periphery of his mirror made his blood run cold. There, glinting faintly in the reflected light behind them, a second sniper crouched amid a mound of broken stone, roughly 60 degrees off their rear flank. The rubble pile that both men had dismissed as empty was, in fact, the second half of a Doppelstellung team. The deadly double-position tactic in action. One German had revealed himself deliberately to draw their attention, while the other had taken aim from an unexpected side angle, ready to kill them the moment they focused forward. Donovan whispered a single, quiet command. 6 o'clock. Martinez turned instantly. They both fired in the same second, Donovan at the decoy in the factory, Martinez at the flanker. 2 shots echoed through the ruins, 2 enemies fell, and for the first time in weeks, the Germans failed to return fire. That morning's skirmish turned into a 4-hour duel. The German marksmen, baffled by the Americans' sudden and impossible awareness of side and rear angles, continued trying their standard methods, adjusting positions and timing. Each time, Donovan's jury-rigged mirror caught the faintest hints of movement. A shifting shadow, the glint of glass, a reflection in dust, and he reacted before the enemy could complete their plan. By midday, the pair had killed 6 German snipers, 4 confirmed by Donovan, 2 by Martinez. What the mirror had provided was more than a gadget. It was a total redefinition of perception. For the first time in Metz, American snipers could effectively look both forward and backward at once, maintaining offensive focus without surrendering awareness. The geometry of battle had reversed itself. Within a few days, Donovan quietly shared the design with others. By November 8th, 9 rifles in his battalion carried improvised mirrors, attached with tape, wire, or strips of tin scavenged from wreckage. The idea spread the way all battlefield inventions do, informally, word of mouth, necessity guiding innovation faster than bureaucracy ever could. Men used shards of polished metal, bits of broken windshields, or even pieces of chrome stripped from destroyed vehicles. No one waited for permission. No one filled out requisition forms. They simply stopped dying at the horrific rate that had decimated their unit. The numbers spoke with cold precision. In October, before Donovan's modification, American snipers in Metz were losing 2 men for every German they managed to kill. By the middle of November, after mirrors began appearing across the battalion, that ratio flipped, 4 German snipers killed for every American lost. The shift was so dramatic that Captain Robert Hayes, commander of the sniper platoon, took notice. On November 10th, he personally inspected Donovan's rifle. Seeing the mirror mounted there, he did something rare for an officer. He ignored its unauthorized origin and officially approved the modification as battalion policy. By November 12th, every sniper under his command carried a version of Donovan's field adaptation. In effect, the sophisticated German counter-sniper doctrine, refined through years of harsh combat on the Eastern Front, had been undone by a shaving mirror and a strip of electrical tape. In December 1944, a training inspector stumbled upon the unorthodox equipment and reported it to higher command. The U.S. Army, skeptical but curious, sent evaluators from Aberdeen Proving Ground in January 1945 to test the idea under controlled conditions. Their findings confirmed what the survivors already knew. The mirror improved sniper survivability in dense, contested urban areas by approximately 300%. The evaluators recommended mass production and inclusion in official doctrine. Yet, as often happens, credit was quietly misplaced. Donovan's name vanished from the reports. Instead, the innovation was attributed to the evaluators who arrived after the fact. Captain Hayes tried to correct the record, but the paperwork disappeared somewhere in the bureaucratic maze. Donovan, characteristically, never pursued the issue. He hadn't built the mirror to earn a medal. He had built it to keep men alive. When the war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945, Donovan had survived 11 grueling months of combat and recorded 47 confirmed kills. The little mirror had saved his life at least 6 documented times, and probably more than that. Martinez, along with dozens of other snipers who had adopted the modification, made it home because they could finally see dangers that would otherwise have gone unseen. After the war, Donovan returned to civilian life quietly. He never spoke publicly about the mirror or sought recognition for it. As optical equipment evolved and newer sight systems offered panoramic fields of vision, his improvised invention faded into history, another makeshift solution that had served its purpose until technology replaced it. Decades later, in 1987, a military historian researching after-action reports stumbled across references to rear-view optical awareness devices used by snipers in Metz. Intrigued, he tracked down surviving veterans, including Sam Martinez, who told him the real story. A scholarly article published in 1989 recounted Donovan's innovation and its impact, but it received little attention outside specialist circles. Michael Donovan passed away on June 7, 2001, at 79 years old. His obituary mentioned his service record and his decorations, but made no note of the mirror or his role in reversing the deadly balance of the sniper war in Metz. At his funeral, several aging veterans, men whose lives had been spared by his simple invention, attended in silence. A piece of glass and a few strips of tape had once stood between them and death. Today, at the National Infantry Museum in Fort Benning, an M1903 Springfield rifle fitted with a mirror attachment stands on display. The accompanying placard identifies it only as a field expedient modification developed during urban combat operations, 1944 to 1945. The description is factual, official, and completely anonymous. It omits the desperation, the creativity, and the defiance that drove a 22-year-old soldier to break rules in order to survive. The mirror's genius was not its engineering, but the courage to think differently under fire, to value life above regulation. In a war dominated by industrial precision and command-driven systems, a small improvised mirror accomplished what countless official programs could not. It saved soldiers' lives. That uncomfortable truth, that real innovation often comes from the battlefield, born of fear, necessity, and defiance, remains as relevant now as it was in 1944. And perhaps that is why, even today, Michael Donovan's name is nowhere on the museum placard. The mirror remains, but the man who thought of it has faded into the reflection.